which it says was a failed attempt to kill President Putin. Kyiv denies any involvement. Our other headlines: a teenager is arrested after a school shooting in Belgrade that leaves 1 adult and 8 pupils dead. Serbia shut schools across the country. There's no sign of a ceasefire. Airstrikes are heard in Sudan's capital despite warring factions agreeing a new week-long truce. And we get our hands dirty at a carnival in China where they say the darker you get, the brighter your future. Russia has accused Ukraine of trying to assassinate President Vladimir Putin in a failed drone attack on the Kremlin. Moscow says it reserves the right to retaliate, but Kyiv has denied any involvement. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova, who's in Moscow for us. Dasha, what more do we know?
Well, the Kremlin has said that 2 drones have attempted to attack the Kremlin in Russian capital Moscow. Those drones have been detected and disabled by the timely actions of the Russian military and special services, as the Kremlin has described that. The Russian president was not at the Kremlin at the time of this attempted attack. He was working in his residence just outside the Russian capital. We also have heard from the Russian authorities that there's been no damage inflicted on the territory of the Kremlin. Some of the witnesses who live nearby the Kremlin have said that they have heard 2 strikes, and that was very loud this night. The Russian authorities say that they regard this incident as an assassination attempt on the Russian president. They also call it an act of terrorism and say that they do reserve the right to retaliate when and how they see fit. We also have heard from them saying that the timetable, that the schedule of the Russian president remains unchanged, and so is the Victory Parade, which will still be taking place in Russia's Red Square on the 9th of May. The Speaker of Russia's State Duma, Vyacheslav Volodin, has said that now Russia will be demanding the use of weapons capable of stopping and destroying the Kyiv terrorist regime, as he described the authorities in Kyiv. Some of the Russian lawmakers have also been saying that that was an aggression against Russia because it was an aggression against the Russian president, and they do say now that there has to be a retaliatory strike, for instance, against the residence of the Ukrainian president. But according to Vyacheslav Volodin, there could be no chance of negotiating with Ukraine any longer after these developments.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Let's take you to Ukraine now and talk to our correspondent Shelby Wilder, who's in Kyiv for us. Shelby, any reaction from Kyiv to these events in the Kremlin?
Well, Ukraine denies any involvement in this drone strike. We just heard an advisor to the chief of Ukraine's presidential office state on Twitter that Ukraine has nothing to do with the incident, but we should also state that Ukraine has not taken responsibility for strikes that have occurred on Russian soil in the past. Otherwise, we know that the spokesperson for the Ukrainian president said that Ukraine does not have any information on these alleged strikes on the Kremlin. Now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is currently in Finland, meeting with the Finnish president and also other regional leaders there. Jamie.
This event aside, what's the latest on the fighting?
Well, just to let you know, we are currently under air raid sirens here in Kyiv, the nation's capital. And early this morning, Russia launched a new wave of drone strikes at Ukraine. Ukraine's Air Force said that it destroyed 21 out of 26 drones. This was the 3rd failed attempted attack on Kyiv within just 6 days. Now, the air defense did eliminate incoming Iranian-made Shahed drones over Kyiv, but air raid sirens went off at around midnight, lasted until 5 a.m., telling residents here to seek immediate shelter. That's the same at this very moment. And otherwise, as for those drones that managed to evade the Ukrainian air defense, they did hit central and eastern Ukraine, destroying infrastructure such as an administrative building and also setting fire to a Ukrainian oil depot. And separately, there was a Russian shelling this morning on the city of Kherson in the southeast of Ukraine that has killed 3 people, wounded 5 others when a supermarket was hit there in the city of Kherson. But again, we're under air raid sirens at the moment, Jamie, so we will keep you posted to see how the rest of today unfolds.
Shelby, we'll come back to you later in the hour. For the moment, our thanks to our correspondent Shelby Wilder in Kyiv. Now the rest of the day's news, and at least 8 children and a security guard have been shot dead at a school in Belgrade. Another 6 pupils and a teacher were injured and have been taken to hospital. The suspect is a pupil at the school. Our correspondent Siobhan McCall reports.
Mass shootings in Serbia are extremely rare. School shootings are unheard of. Parents and pupils comfort each other outside the Vladislav Ribnikar Primary School in Belgrade, where a 14-year-old boy opened fire. Some are still awaiting news on their children. Others told of the terror that their children faced.
My daughter saw the security guard collapse right in front of her. She heard shots before that but thought they were firecrackers. But when she saw the security guard fall, she immediately rushed back to class. She was scared. She told the teacher, "There is shooting upstairs."
The suspect allegedly used his father's gun. He's reported to have walked into a history class and opened fire before being arrested in the school playground. His classmates say they are surprised, as he was a good pupil.
We used to be in the same class, but I switched class in the second term. He was a quiet guy. He looked nice. He had good grades, but we didn't know much about him. He was not so open with everybody. I definitely wasn't expecting this to happen.
An investigation is underway into a possible motive. Serbia has strict gun laws, but gun ownership is among the highest in Europe. And experts have repeatedly warned about the danger from hundreds of thousands of illegal weapons left in the region following wars and civil unrest in the 1990s. Siobhan McCall, CGTN.
Well, let's talk now to our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic in Belgrade. Alyosha, I guess the police think they have their suspect. What's the latest on the investigation?
Yes, Jamie, I'm in front of the elementary school of Vladislav Ribnikar here in Belgrade. Behind me is a line of police officers cordoning off this area. And of course, as you can see, a lot of journalists, some of them are actually right now speaking to some of the parents of children, of pupils who are actually attending this school. It is still a big shock for everybody here in Serbia. This is something unheard of ever in the history of this country. This is the first time an entire country is in state of the deep shock. What we learned so far is that the perpetrator actually was 14 years old pupil, one of the best students in his class. He was attending 7th grade in this school, which is an elite school here in the city center of Belgrade, with some of top people of the country actually sending their children in this school. He, according to the Serbian media, used 2 guns, 2 pistols. Both of those pistols were in legal possession of his father. His father spoke to the police and he said that both weapons were in the safe under the lock, and that his son apparently knew the lock combination. He opened that safe and he took it and brought those 2 guns here and used them to kill his classmates and a guard, security guard. 2 more people are actually fighting for their lives at this moment in the hospitals in Belgrade.
Alyosha, people there clearly in a state of shock. I mean, has there been any statement from the government about what's happened?
Government had a press conference maybe a couple of hours ago, and they also expressed their deep shock. Health minister said that she was for 40 years in a health industry, that she is a medical doctor for 40 years. She went through the civil wars in former Yugoslavia, and what happened here is something that she never witnessed before. So the government decided that they will have a 3-day mourning, national mourning, starting from Friday. that all classes were suspended throughout the country today, and tomorrow the classes will start with a minute of silence throughout the country. It is still, we will have to wait for a little bit longer to see what steps government will take, what future steps government will take after this unprecedented incident.
Alyosha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic in Belgrade. The European Union has agreed to finalise a plan for member states to jointly buy ammunition for Ukraine. Sweden, the current holder of the EU's rotating presidency, says EU ambassadors approved the decision to support Ukraine's armed forces with more than $1 billion worth of ammunition and missiles. The suspect in the shooting of 5 people at a house in Texas has been caught after 4 days on the run. The police found Francisco Oropeza hiding in a cupboard under a pile of laundry several kilometres from his home. Victims, who were his neighbours, had asked him to stop firing his rifle in his yard before he entered their house and shot them. The United States and Mexico have agreed new immigration policies ahead of an expected rise in migration numbers. Tougher restrictions introduced by former President Donald Trump are due to expire next week. Under this new plan, Mexico will take in more migrants from Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba and Nicaragua, while up to 100,000 people from Honduras, Guatemala and El Salvador will be eligible to live and work in the United States if they have family there. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the United Nations aid chief urges Sudan's warring sides to protect aid deliveries after the looting of 6 aid trucks.
There's a new agenda for a new world, accelerating change in almost every part of our lives. It's shifting the norms of how we work, travel and connect, how we think, interact and develop. It's a new reality, a new agenda with me, Juliette Mann.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Russia accuses Ukraine of this drone attack on the Kremlin, which it says was a failed attempt to kill President Putin. Kyiv denies any involvement. Our other headlines: a teenager is arrested after a school shooting in Belgrade that leaves 1 adult and 8 pupils dead. Serbia shuts schools across the country. Well, there's no sign of the ceasefire in Sudan, despite the warring sides agreeing a new 7-day truce. Airstrikes have been heard in Khartoum, with plumes of smoke seen in the capital. Sudan's health ministry says at least 550 people have now been killed and nearly 5,000 injured. The United Nations head of humanitarian affairs, Martin Griffiths, has arrived in Sudan, seeking assurances that aid shipments will be given safe passage after 6 aid trucks were looted. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Naba Moeddin, who's in Madani, around 130 kilometres from Khartoum. Naba, let's talk about this new 7-day-long ceasefire. Is your information that it's made any difference on the ground?
Actually, Jamie, there is no confirmed agreement on the ceasefire. The RSF just denied any agreement on this 7 days ceasefire. The conflicting news make it impossible to predict whether it will happen on Thursday or not. The RSF are denying it, and they said they did not send any confirmation to South Sudan. So there is conflicting news about it. It's not confirmed yet whether the ceasefire will take place or not, but the military just confirmed that they agreed on it. So the conflicting news make it very difficult to understand what's going on, why RSF is denying it, and why South Sudan announced that the two sides confirmed it. So till now, it's unclear whether the ceasefire will take place on Thursday or it will be cancelled.
Naba, a desperate report from the United Nations saying that 6 of their aid trucks with humanitarian aid have been looted. What more do we know about this?
Yes, Jamie, actually it took place in western Darfur when the 6 trucks of WFP full of aid, medicine, food, life-saving necessities were there on way to they were on their way to West Darfur in Al Geneina, catastrophic region, and they were looted in the route. There is wide condemnation of the looting, and the two sides just said they agreed on the ceasefire, and they will, of course, provide a humanitarian access or safe corridors to humanitarian aid workers. But despite of all of the assurances the two sides provided for UN agencies, the looting took place in West Darfur, and the UN condemned that and asked the two sides to give enough assurances to make sure that the aid will be delivered for those vulnerable people and people in need, especially in West Darfur area. So yes, 6 trucks were looted, and also Saudi Arabia cultural center in Khartoum was looted too. So this is a real threat to all of the aid workers and humanitarian aid organizations that want to give their hand to Sudan, unless the two sides confirm that they can provide humanitarian corridors and safe passages for aid workers and organizations. It will be very difficult to provide any aid for Sudanese people, which is really bad, not only for the war, but for the people who are in need, especially in West Darfur and West Sudan generally.
Naba, thank you for that. Our correspondent Naba Moeddin in Madani, around 130 kilometres from Khartoum. Well, let's talk now to Jan Pospisil, an associate professor at Coventry University Centre for Trust, Peace and Social Relations. Professor, good to see you. First of all, the warring parties have agreed to name their envoys for peace talks. Do you sense that perhaps we're not far from seeing the two sides sitting at the negotiating table?
I mean, as such as in the report, there's conflicting news on that. I mean, on the one hand, there is obviously a good contact by the South Sudanese to both sides. They have, through the security advisor, good relations to Hemeti. The government has also kind of stable relationships with Burhan, who is also a guarantor of the South Sudanese peace process. So in a way, the South Sudanese would be in a good position. On the other hand, I'm very, very skeptical that at the moment there is a space for political negotiations. I honestly don't think so. There has been, this conflict is a result of failed negotiations before, and actually there is no other proposition tabled that would change this.
Taking that on board, South Sudan seems to be spearheading whatever mediation process might be being thought about. Just explain to us what advantage Juba might have in taking a leading role in this.
I mean, Juba has already hosted the Sudanese peace process that ended with the so-called Juba Peace Agreement, which was then also negotiated on behalf of IGAD, the regional organization, by the South Sudanese Mediation Commission. The head of this mediation commission, EU, has long-standing relationships with Sudan. He grew up in Sudan himself, very close to Bashir, and has nowadays, it is said, very close relationships also to Hemeti, which are mainly running through the United Arab Emirates. So there is strong relationships here. On the other hand, the presidency has solid relationships with General Burhan. Burhan himself is in Juba quite regularly, so they know one another very well, also on a high level. And there would be kind of, if there is some leeway, they would be well placed to host negotiations.
The big concern, of course, is contagion, whatever word you want to use, overspill, and a wider regional conflict. I mean, concerns have been raised in the Darfur region. Should this conflict go on and on. I mean, is your sense that there is a danger that it leads to a full-blown civil war and all that that means?
I mean, the developments in Darfur are really, really concerning. The issue is that now there is more or less a free-floating of tribal militias that start to loot in wide areas of the country. In El Janena, there is shocking pictures coming up. What we have not yet seen, and this is the big risk, that there is a number of armed organizations in Darfur that have considerable military strength. It is particularly some of the factions of the Sudanese Liberation Movement, especially Abdul Wahid, who is placed around Jebel Mara, but also Minawi's faction. There's also Jem in the region. They have so far not yet started to fight in this war, but you have to take into account that they are protecting their people. They are kind of a protection force of various other tribes in the region, and there is mounting pressure on them to indeed enforce a certain protection mandate for their people if this looting is going to continue. And if this happens, then this war is definitely going to escalate.
Professor, good to see you. Thank you for your time. That's Jan Pospisil, Associate Professor at Coventry University Centre for Trust, Peace and Social Relations. More than 100 people have been arrested right across Europe in a crackdown on the 'Ndrangheta, the mafia organisation with links to Italy's Calabria region. Police across Germany, Belgium, France, Italy, Portugal and Spain have been coordinating an investigation for 3 years. This mafia group is accused of money laundering, criminal tax evasion, drug smuggling and weapons trafficking. France's Constitutional Council is to rule on whether the country's controversial reforms to increase the state retirement age from 62 to 64 should be put to a state referendum. This is the second time lawmakers who oppose this new law have appealed to the council, at first being rejected just 2 weeks ago. Protests, including violent clashes, have been held across the country to protest against these changes. Zhang Zhujiang has become the first male Chinese tennis player to reach the quarterfinals of an ATP Masters 1000 tournament. The 26-year-old made history after beating the American Taylor Fritz at the Madrid Open. Zhang will now face Aslan Karatsev from Russia later this week. The Spanish government says it wants to boost global exports, particularly from its agriculture and food manufacturing sector. A string of new agreements were signed while Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez was in China, including one that's set to benefit Spain's almond producers. Our correspondent Ken Brown reports.
From Tutankhamun's tomb to Greek mythology, Roman weddings to the Bible. The humble almond has a rich history. Almond's origin traces back to Western Asia, modern-day Jordan, Iran and China before they were brought to the Mediterranean. Almonds now look set to head back to Asia in large quantities thanks to a recent deal finalized by Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez in Beijing. 50,000 tons have a green light for export to China from next year, with that amount doubling by 2032. That is good news for companies like Crisolar in Catalonia, an association representing over 24,000 almond growers.
Well, this is a fantastic, great news. The Spanish farmers had now a nice opportunity to sell our almonds into the China market. The trees are already planted in the last 10-15 years, and this is why we expect that by 2030-2035, probably Spain can reach even bigger crops than 200,000.
Spain is the world's second largest producer of almonds behind the United States, accounting for around 10% of the world's total output. This new export deal should mean over $650 million annually from China alone, as Spain looks to increase its agri-food exports on the world stage. Demand is on the increase globally for almonds, part of the world-famous healthy Mediterranean diet, but the industry is facing a major challenge: climate change. Longer, drier summer seasons and drought have caused a decline in the quantity produced. New techniques like burying water drip lines underground helps reduce use, and many almond varieties in Spain have also been selected because of their more efficient water footprint.
Almost 80% of almond production in Spain is now growing on dry soil. If you look at the data, you can see our method of production uses less water on average than other countries. All the farmers in our association are issued with guidelines on the best use of water.
The Spanish government is hoping that recent bilateral agreements on almond and fresh fruit will open the door to further opportunities in China as it looks to diversify into growing markets beyond Europe. Ken Brown, CGTN, Tarragona.
The 5-day Labor Day holiday at the start of May is big news in China, an opportunity for people to travel and experience new places. Following the lifting of COVID restrictions, tourist destinations across the country are preparing for visitors, including one small county close to the Myanmar border. Our correspondent Yang Jinghao reports.
The fun here might just be unparalleled. In southwest China's Cangyuan, a county at the border with Myanmar, the carnival exhilarates both locals and tourists. It's called Mo Ni Hei, literally make you black. In the revelry, participants smear a mud-like paint on each other to express good wishes.
I was told that the muddier you get, the happier you will be. I believe that I will be definitely happy and lucky in the rest of the year.
Cangyuan is home to the majority of the ethnic Hua people, and the event originates from their folk traditions and festivals.
Hua people revere nature and life. In the past, when our ancestors were living a poor life, they just smear ash on their forehead before they left home in a bid to drive away evil and pray for good luck.
Today, the paint, known as Niang Bu Luo in the Hua language, is mainly made of plant extract, and the event has become a window for outsiders to learn about the community and its long history.
It's been 3 years since the carnival was last held. It's so much fun. Everyone is passionate and people are interacting in a polite way.
I've been expecting it for a long time. It's hilarious and I feel very happy.
As the country emerges from the pandemic, many cities are looking at ways to get the economy rebounding. One strategy is promoting distinct activities during the holidays. As the most ethnically diverse region in China, it's only natural for Yunnan to explore its rich culture and ethnic traditions. Here in Cangyuan, the local government says they will step up efforts to make the event sustainable and more attractive, which is expected to better stimulate local tourism. Yang Jinghao, CGTN, Yunnan Province.
And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Inside. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
In today's World Insight, a beauty industry magnate, U.S. icon, who also pioneered TV programs bridging the East and the